Right, we've given a few minutes just for the last people to join, so I think it's good time to start. So if I can welcome the panelists on the screen as well. Right, well, hopefully everybody can see us, and good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to welcome you to next instalment of one of our cloud webinars entitled How to Optimize Your Cloud Journey. I'm John Portlock. I'm delighted to host you today. I'm Custom Solutions Director at Digital Space. My team work very closely with our Cloud Center of Excellence here to explore and help organizations understand, discover and utilize the cloud in the best possible ways. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be hosting a really interesting discussion, and we're delighted to welcome one of our customers and people who have been very involved in the cloud project themselves. So that's Flagship Group. I'll introduce all the panelists in a second, but thank you very much for spending some time with us today, and I think it'll be really insightful discussion and understanding exactly what it's like to deliver and optimize on the cloud. Before we start, what I wanted to do, and I always do this with cloud webinar, is set a bit of the scene and then introduce the panelists and get into the conversation. So hopefully, if I share my screen correctly, you should all be able to now see the presentation mode. So please shout if there's any problems. But we're talking about cloud optimization, and clearly cloud has a big part to play in any IT operation focus, and also the benefits of trying to deliver better outcomes. And it's worth us just considering for a second around what 2022 has held for cloud so far, looking a bit backwards and forwards, and also some of the statistics. And I love statistics personally, because they give you a great insight into a broad cross-section of industries and customers around what are they experiencing with cloud, what's motivating them to leverage cloud, and some of the key things that are high up on their priority list. If we just look at this from an independent analysis perspective, I've collated just a few really interesting stats to whet your appetite for the forthcoming discussion. So what are the two top drivers that customers cite as the reasons for driving towards cloud, selecting cloud as a strategic imperative around their IT operations? 71% of the organizations surveyed said that their top priority was to seek speed improvements. Obviously, every organization is slightly different in the way that they try to find those speed improvements. It could be speed to market, speed to delivery, speed of manufacturing, speed of response to customer service, but it's one of the most important things that they're seeking as an objective. And the second one is greater flexibility. And I guess flexibility comes in different shapes and sizes as well. For us at Digital Space, one of the most interesting things is the flexibility and the speed at which an organization can respond to business and opportunities that present themselves. So that could be either responding to a market opportunity to take greater share of the market, or indeed responding to challenges that they see and they need to address to avoid IT operational disadvantage. And then delivering results. 90% of those organizations that have already been on that cloud journey said that they are satisfied with the outcomes that cloud's delivered. Nice stat to suggest that cloud does deliver against those objectives and enables them to be more competitive in that market space. However, on a reflection of that, 2 out of 3 companies, that's 75% roughly, between 66 and 75% of those organizations say that they didn't achieve all their expected outcomes. So it's not that they wouldn't go on that cloud journey, nor that they thought it was at a disadvantage, but maybe that they had either over-expected against their objectives, or maybe not quite as clearly defined what those objectives should be from the outset. Just 2 really interesting statistics. And then when they look at the reasons that maybe they didn't achieve all those objectives, the top 3 answers were skills gap, referring to whether they thought their own team or indeed their partner ecosystem was ready to fulfill against the changes that would come through cloud. Legacy system complexity and security. And typically security is about the concern around opening cloud up, embracing the edge more. It's around not necessarily not delivering against security, but having to slow down because they were concerned that they hadn't considered all of those security objectives. And then finally, the organizations have been on that journey. 61% of those organizations continue or plan to optimize existing cloud deployments, which is a 5th year in a row that that has been the top initiative. That could be making sure that they drive value for money, cost optimization, or indeed continue to drive innovation through cloud. So it's clear that there is a load of benefit to achieve and unlock when you go on a cloud journey, but likewise there's some important considerations. So hopefully that sets the scene nicely to then move on to introduce our panelists. And I'm delighted that I've got a couple of colleagues from digital space joining me. And of course, as I've already mentioned, it's a real pleasure to host with Flagship Group. So Tim, can I ask you to just introduce yourself, and then I'll hand over to Gary as well.
I think Tim might be having some technical issues.
Okay, the challenge of technology. Okay, well we'll see if he comes back and joins us. But Gary, as you've piped up, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself then?
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar. My name's Gary Beddow. I'm part of the cloud team at Digital Space. Work very closely with Flagship on their journey. It's been a fantastic journey, and hence inviting them today to go through that and give you a real feel for how we did that. Yeah, so really pleased to join. You know, by all means, ask any questions today. They'll be in the chat on the right, and we'll all cover those at the end. But we hope this is a really useful webinar for everybody attending.
Brilliant, thanks, Gary. And I'll hand over to you actually to introduce and then go through with Flagship and get Matt and Andy in on the conversation.
Cool. So very welcome. Welcome to Matt Brazier, Director of IT for Flagship, and Andy Lingley. He's number 2, I'd say, the right-hand man. And obviously, Matt, it'd be really cool if you could just introduce Flagship as an organisation and give the attendees a view of you as a business, and then we can go into the nitty-gritty around the cloud journey.
Yeah, cheers, Gary. So Flagship Group, we are a housing association in the east of England. We manage around 32,000 homes, a little bit more than that. We have, I think it's 3 different housing associations operating in a kind of 3 different geographies, around 10,000 homes apiece. We have our own in-house repairs and maintenance capability, doing all the kitchen and bathroom replacements and all the responsive repairs that are reported, and capital works and everything else you can imagine a repairs and maintenance company does. A few years ago, we acquired our own gas company, Gasway, who are the biggest gas and heating business in the east of England. So they do, all the gas maintenance, boiler installs, stuff like that on our properties. But they also have contracts with local authorities and the like as well, to do similar for those, and kind of a B2C offering. And also as part of the group, we not only buy kind of properties from developers to expand our stock portfolio, we build our own land edge schemes where we build our own properties and estates, and we have a homelessness charity as well. So quite a mix of services we have to support from a centralised IT.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Andy, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Andy Lingley. I'm head of IT at Flagship, looking after infrastructure and support. So really it is my team that is looking after the AWS estate. And to give a kind of overview, we're running about 60 different servers in AWS, and then a number of other things as well, such as the AppStream service, workspaces, all the security service obviously as well, and just a whole load of other stuff in there at the minute.
Cool. And I've just seen Tim's now joined us on video. So Tim, would you, obviously a bit out of order, but would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So apologies, my webcam's having fun. It's going dark and light and then disappearing altogether. But thankfully, the important thing is to have other options around, and the rest of the panel are well able to answer questions. So I'll answer if I can, but otherwise rely on the rest of you. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. So Matt, first question to you really. When we first met, when we were introduced to yourselves, you'd already decided that you wanted to move to the cloud. What would be really useful is to share what drove that decision or those decisions.
Yeah, so I think around 2017 we moved to a new office in Norwich City Centre, and lifting and shifting all the kit from the old office to the new office was difficult, to say the least. And but we did kind of go for a best-in-class on-premise kind of data room and things like that as well. So a couple of years later, when it came to our kit refresh timelines and things like that, and we were looking at our disaster recovery site and how much it would cost to get that up to the kind of the same spec as our primary site. And as I alluded to earlier, we'd kind of acquired Gasway and insourced our repairs and maintenance, and we were really, that 24/7 support and always on became really, really important, and that reacting to that became really important. So we weren't just looking at a refresh, but improving as well. So I think we were even looking at, you know, having generator power supplies and a generator, you know, within 30 minutes you can get it to site to get your on-premise back on again. And the costs were going kind of up and up and up when we were looking at that. And we just thought, well, can we do it differently? Is it the right time to look at something else, to look at kind of maybe a cloud migration or something like that? So really, it was the driver was kind of cost based to begin with, but we also kind of engaged our senior leaders, senior management team around where we were wanting to go as a business and what kind of technologies and infrastructure did we need to kind of enable strategy and things like that as well. So not only was it financial, it was a strategic decision as well.
Brilliant. And did you look at multiple clouds at the time in that sort of discovery phase?
Yeah, so we did our own discovery first and foremost, and we looked at a few. I think we might have done, I think we did, you know, AWS this year, maybe even the stuff Google were doing. I think we had a little look at the time as well. But really, we wanted to kind of go out to market and try and not let, you know, previous influences influence that decision, if you like. So where you've gone Office 365 and things like that, and it would have been very, very easy, I think, to knee jerk into a kind of let's just go Azure or let's just go here and kind of do it like that. I think we definitely would have missed a trick with that. So we wanted to go out kind of for an open and fair and competitive kind of procurement once we made the decision, and glad we did. But yeah, I think I think it's easy to knee jerk and think, you know, what's best. But that open procurement framework we kind of used definitely led us to a different decision than we all thought, if I'm being honest. I don't think any of us thought until late in the day we'd be moving into AWS.
Cool. And thinking back, obviously, previous conversations that you and I have had, I remember you were saying about when you were looking at partners to help you on that journey. And I know the journey was a different one from what you're originally planning out to do, but in that early days when we're helping you shape what it might look like, you know, you said you wanted a partner that you could work with you on the migration rather than do it to you. You know, were you able to, you know, achieve that working relationship in, you know, during the migration, given that it was at speed?
Yeah.
Speed.
I would say so, definitely. And I think what we weren't, one of the things where I think, and that's why we ended up going down the route we did, was around, we wanted a strategic partnership. You know, the move to the cloud wasn't just to lift it and shift it and land it in the cloud and, you know, as a typical supplier, walk away and we'll pick it up from there and things like that. We did see, you know, when you're in AWS, the services you have access to, this, you know, all of that kind of the systems you have access to, the data insight and all of that. We really wanted that strategic partner to stay with us for, you know, a few years and kind of help us beyond that first day one plan, you know, the redesign of the cloud. Where should we be going? Where should we be looking? Where should we be expanding our cloud services, and where we should be refactoring and things like that. So we weren't looking for a, you know, we were never looking for a come work with us for 6 months, lift and shift, see you later kind of relationship. We were definitely looking for someone we could, and that's why we use the term partner, someone we could partner strategically with, who can help us deliver not just the project, but the outcomes that are, you know, the business expects, the outcomes for our customers and everything else that comes along with it as well.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. I think
Matt,
this one probably.
can I just ask for a moment? Sorry. You talked there about, well, you had some Azure beforehand, and then you did this procurement, and you decided to go AWS. You know, with what made you choose that? Was it just that you had a partner who could do the AWS for you and didn't have the same sort of partner for Azure, or were there other things as well?
I think there was two things for me. So one was, I think we would have got a supplier. When you looked at the bids that came in, I think the Azure bids were very much, we'll execute a project for you, and, you know, we'll land you in the cloud, and then we'll execute another phase. And it was kind of like that. It was very, I think the plans were very waterfall, very contract based almost, and very kind of driven by contractuals and stuff like that. Whereas what we found with obviously yourselves at Digital Space, we could be a lot more agile. It was a lot more conversational. It was more about driving outcomes. I think with those other partners, it was give us X pounds and we'll execute this project by this date. Whereas we were looking for someone where we could say the business outcome we want is this, or the outcome we need from our customers is this. Can you help us get there? And I'd say that's one of the main differences culturally that we saw with the Azure partners versus kind of yourselves. And secondly, cost. And that was a big surprise that actually the AWS bid, pound for pound, was cheaper than the Azure bid.
Thank you.
Cool.
And Tim, just to direct that question sort of slightly back to you from a Cloud Centre of Excellence at Digital Space, do they fall roughly in line with what you see, you know, other organisations engage with around, you know, making that comparison between cloud, or even the driver and the business case behind that? How does that relate?
So I think there's often a big focus on cost. It's difficult not to, because, you know, migration is generally a big undertaking. People are worried always with IT projects that costs will escalate. They want to tie that down. They want to be sure of the business case. I think, you know, it's great for us to hear that piece of partnership was something we were good on and chosen for. But I think as well that there is a tendency, certainly before people migrate to cloud, for them to think of cloud as the destination, i.e. the project is to get to cloud. But once you're on cloud, actually the project is then to make great use of cloud. And that's very interesting as a difference. And I think it's really valuable as well that that Flagship looked at it and wanted somebody who could understand what they wanted in business outcomes and could help them get there. And that's the right approach to get value from the platform once you're there.
Yeah, great, thank you.
I think that would be good actually to segue into Andy actually, and obviously, you know, as you said, a lot of organisations focus on the cloud migration as the end of the journey. It'd be really interesting, Andy, to give us a bit of a view on how you've evolved, you know, how things evolved. Obviously, we didn't do this to you, we did it with you. You know, you've got staff that obviously are now skilling up on the cloud as well. You know, and also we've helped you also on that journey post migration. So it'd be good to get your view of the world and how things have changed.
Yeah, I think, like I say, it's a constantly evolving landscape. AWS are always bringing on new services, new features that we can leverage. One of the benefits of having a kind of partner that's engaged with AWS as well is as they get wind of new things coming online, that they, you know, Digital Space will share those with us as well, which gives us a bit of a heads up of things that we can look to take on. In terms of upskilling the team, AWS have provided us with training courses, you know, with accredited external training partners. So all 6 of my team, including myself, have all done 2 training courses with QA, who are one of the training brokers that they use. We also have what we call office hours calls with AWS on a 2-weekly basis, where we can talk to them about a service that we're looking at, how does this service work, or do some kind of retrospective training on different features and different services as well. They've got a really good sort of sandbox environment they can deliver training through, and we've done bits and pieces through them with that. Again, we can always lean on you guys at Digital Space as well. Having built up some of the relationships that we have with, kind of key members of your sort of technical team, they're always very good in terms of if I've got a quick question, I can just reach out to somebody on Teams, and if it's a quick, a relatively sort of straightforward response, I normally get a response within, a short time, and that can sometimes, that's invaluable as well in terms of just moving things on sometimes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. I think there's going to be some people on this webinar that everyone thinks, looks at their own cloud journey and is worried about certain legacy applications they've got sitting around their estate. It'd be good to get the feeling, obviously I know, we haven't got brand new applications. These solutions are embedded. You might write your own applications as well. Were any of these legacy applications an issue in your migration? And how did you, how did we with you help on that migration journey?
I mean, everything we run is Windows based, and when you're deploying stuff into AWS within the EC2 service, everything again, you've got the whole Windows supported stack on there available. Our housing management system at the time we did the migration was legacy, to kind of put it mildly, and we haven't had any issues really with applications not working. We've had to bolt some other services around it. Things like AppStream and Workspaces, which are sort of desktop in the cloud services, which we've used as a replacement to our Citrix infrastructure we had pre-migration. We also had a couple of services that were, from a penetration test point of view, they were not particularly secure, just because, again, the legacy nature of them. Wrapping them around in the AWS security, they're now almost invisible apart from to the services that need to use them, which has kind of improved our security footprint as well alongside that.
Well, great answer.
Yeah, and do you find that legacy apps actually work better afterwards or worse? How was that transition?
In terms of the housing management system, certainly we've seen improvements in performance on that. I think our back-end database server, it's about 2/3 the size it was on premise in terms of its processor and CPU, and we have had feedback from users that actually it's quite a bit quicker than it was running on premise. So kind of a combination of all those different sort of new infrastructure, new services that we've wrapped around it have actually seen sort of tangible improvements in performance as well.
That's good.
And Andy, I've got one question as well, which, obviously back to my intro, legacy applications was one of the top reasons cited for, people being worried about cloud migration. Did you have any concerns, before doing the cloud journey? Were there any concerns around, would you struggle to migrate? Would you get those into the cloud successfully? What was your sort of pre the cloud journey view of tackling this?
I think certainly in terms of the housing management system, that was our biggest worry, because obviously that's a fundamental part to running our business. One of the things that we did before we engaged with Digital Space is we just run up a very basic sort of sandbox environment in AWS just off our own back, and we're able to kind of just prove at a very basic level that actually we could migrate it there and it does work. So there's always kind of options around that available as well. There's loads of videos and stuff online to kind of get you started if you want to have a bit of a poke around. If you liaise with AWS, they're always very good at kind of reaching out in those initial stages and right the way through the journey and helping customers kind of onboard, testing, really sort of showing off what they can do.
Yeah, I think thanks for that, because I think that's quite an interesting thing. I think, Tim, you may concur that quite a lot of our engagements typically have a almost like a mini proof of concept, or at least a sandbox exercise, as Andy describes. Is that also your view as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, people when they're thinking about moving their infrastructure to the cloud, whichever cloud it is, are concerned about, well, is it going to be the same? Are we going to be able to cope? Are we going to be able to manage it? And so anything you can do to give them confidence early on is helpful. And so we like to do proof of concepts if we can, just so that people go, oh, actually, I've seen it, touched it, it works, you know, and now I feel more comfortable about what I do next. Also, I think the advantage of proof of concepts can be in terms of that internal team. You know, people like the group around Andy, where those guys may have read about stuff, they may have done a bit of a training course, but the proof of concept actually gives them a bit more of an experience of it, and then they're more confident as well. And that's how you sort of tip the seesaw from being, oh, we know the old environment, we don't know the new one, to gradually, oh yeah, actually we're much more comfortable on the new one.
I think the other thing as well is with the cloud services all being you know, build on what you use, you know, that proof of concept costs us, I think, £50 to £100, and we run it over, I think, 3 days. So in terms of your ability to kind of stand up those proof of concepts, it's really not expensive. There's no kind of upfront cost or anything like that. And as long as you switch the services off when you're not using them, they're not generating cost.
I mean, that piece about generating costs is something that a lot of people are concerned about on the cloud, because it's generally pay as you go. And the thing with pay as you go is if you aren't watching the meter, you can suddenly go, oh, I've spent too much. So, you know, that's something we particularly try and do things about. We have a FinOps expert who's just this year, the FinOps Foundation created new exams for that, and they've passed those exams. So there aren't many people in the UK currently qualified, but they use a range of techniques to try and help manage costs down. And I know that, you know, I think they talk to you sort of on a monthly or similar basis to try and make sure that basically the meter doesn't run on and you get value for money.
Yeah.
I think for me, that's another good thing about the partner, is that is a big change in the way you manage your finances and your budget. So on premise, you'd say, I want to spend, I don't know, say £1 million, and I'll do my on premise infrastructure. And it's just, it depreciates, doesn't it, over 3 years? Let's say it's easy. I just get that depreciation and it can't be changed, and sorry, finance, that's my depreciation, and that is that. Whereas in the cloud, it is lagging. You've got that lagging and leading management of looking at what you're spending, constantly looking at it every month. But that level of control, I've got to say, really helps us manage budgets and things like that as well. So it's a little bit different, and you know, Digital Space has been really good in supporting us with that, I must say. But that's another good thing why you need a partnership and not a supplier.
Yeah, and you can set budgets and price alerts. So if your spend's kind of creeping up or things like that, you know, you can set the alerting up to make you aware of that. So you've got time to kind of get on top of it before you get, you know, the bill at the end of the month.
Absolutely. But Matt, I know one of the shifts for a housing company is from CapEx to operating, because typically, you know, CapEx you're experts in because you're buying big assets all the time. And cloud is typically operating. You know, was that difficult to argue with your finance people?
Well, I always call that CapEx and OpEx piece. It's the dark arts of financial accountancy, isn't it? Ultimately, cash is king. Whatever business you're in, whatever kind of industry, whatever sector, you know, previous sectors I've worked in want it all to be OpEx, whereas in housing they want it all to be CapEx where it's at all possible because of the accountancy. But cash is king. The underlying kind of cash you're spending daily, weekly, yearly, kind of on your infrastructure. That's what everybody should be caring about. And I think when we looked at it, yeah, there were some swings from CapEx to OpEx and the like. But ultimately, when you're talking about, I think our business case was £250,000 over 5 years savings. You can't ignore that, regardless of the CapEx or OpEx conversation. Any CFO will be rubbing their hands with glee, regardless of the CapEx or OpEx with savings like that. And I think the most expensive kind of time is kind of that day one where you've probably just done mostly a lift and shift. And again, my CFO and my director of finance love it, because day one was almost the peak cost for us, that lift and shift. With Digital Space, we've refactored, we've redesigned, and that cost is consistently, almost, I would say, month on month, that monthly running cost is down. And like Andy said, there's a huge amount of tools and a huge amount of data to help you with all of that. But yeah, the CapEx, OpEx thing, cash, talk about cash, that's what it's all about. And, you know, any accountant will tell you that cash is king.
Cool. One thing we didn't mention at the start of the call was, obviously this hasn't just been about migrating applications. One of the areas that we did work with you on, and I know there was the reason why that was. You had an issue with your telephony system across the organisation. Obviously, by the end of that first week of that migration, we switched across 180 users of your agents from your contact centres, all 5 contact centres, over onto Amazon Connect, which is the cloud sort of contact centre solution. And how's that been? And I know that was the start of the journey, but it'd be good to get has that been able to support your wider needs? How has that worked for you as an organisation, going pure cloud for your telephony?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we run 180 odd agents across all 5 of our contact centres. About 110 to 120 of those would be sort of concurrent users at sort of peak time. The contact centres handle business-wide somewhere in the region of 75 to 80,000 calls a month. So, Connect is able to, handle large volumes of calls. It's fairly seamless. We've got chatbot capabilities and stuff like that built into it as well. Yeah, it just kind of works for the agents. There's no clients and stuff to install on there, so in terms of a deployment point of view, it's really quite easy. It's just log into a web link. Everything is then kind of driven through your web browser, Chrome, or whatever chosen web browser is. Totally secure, as you'll find out very quickly if you kind of get into conversation with AWS. Security is one of the kind of core pillars of their service. So all the GDPR compliance, all that kind of stuff is all kind of really baked into the service from day one.
Well, and I mean and I know that's evolved over the last year. It's have web chat. We've helped you expand the sort of IVR, the sort of self-service. You've been able to iterate, haven't you? On top, you haven't just that's what we put in and job done. You can iterate and evolve speed. Yeah,
again, with the wider cloud estate, it's constantly evolving as the business needs change. We've got the flexibility and the ability to tweak and iterate as we need to do or try different things.
Brilliant. One of the things you mentioned earlier, Andy, was the workspaces and the app stream, which was the sort we provided, help you provide those secure desktops. I think it was to over 800 users in the end. I know that's evolved over time.
Yep.
I can see what you needed in that really short term, but is that part of your ongoing strategy? What has that brought to the table?
As kind of things move on, I mean the remote desktop apps really are there to support sort of the legacy applications, so housing management system and shared drives, those kind of services which aren't kind of web front ended at the moment, really. What we're kind of seeing is that starting to depreciate a little bit as we are making stuff, more kind of web driven, sort of cloud native to a certain extent. So I think where we started off at about 800-ish workspaces, a lot of these users now transitioned over to AppStream, which, as you know, is better from a kind of cost point of view, and it's a sort of proper cloud scaling solution as opposed to workspaces, which is a little bit more sort of traditional reserve compute, and both work quite well in their own way, depending on what your use case are for them. But there's a VPN client as well, which AWS do, which we're using to kind of replace those. But really what we've got is a whole sort of toolbox of different things which enable us to use different solutions for different parts of the business, depending on what their needs are, rather than saying, as we did previously, kind of you've got Citrix and this is the solution you use if you're not sitting in the office for the day.
Yeah, right answer. One of the, I suppose this is a bit of an exam question, but obviously you've been using this now for probably over a year. You've been on the cloud, I'd say fully on the cloud for over a year. Do you feel more or less secure? Are the systems more resilient, less resilient? What are they?
Infinitely more secure, I think. Again, as anyone will find out as they've used AWS in terms of certainly the Windows Server estate, everything is underpinned by AWS security groups, which is basically sort of firewalls for all your individual servers, and you can make those as tight or restrictive as you want to. But in the way we've deployed it, we've siloed all of our different systems together, so systems can only talk to each other if they need to for a particular reason. Otherwise, one system can't talk to another, and you know, when you start to put those security barriers up, it gives you much more control over your infrastructure as well, and who can do what on it. In terms of resilience, you know, we're kind of leaning on the fact that AWS are able to kind of provide an infinitely better service than what we could ever provide with what, you know, a data center that we've built. You know, it comes down to, I think, those economies of scale that Amazon are just able to kind of introduce across you know, their data center estate that you could never reasonably do in an organization of our size.
And
So
I know you, Tim.
One of the ways that you know that's done for you, I guess, is previously you had you know some different data centers, but not a lot of things shared across. Whereas now with this, you've got things spread across 3 different data centers that are geographically separate. So even if a data center goes down, you're still able to recover easily, or indeed not even notice it. Basically, balancers will put you know, create more resources for you.
Yeah, depending on how you build your applications, you know, AWS works in geographic regions. So you've got in London, say, 3 individual data centers, all completely independent and resilient from one another. You've got things like load balancers and stuff like that in the estate. So the load balancer geographically splits across the different data centers. So if a data center was to go offline for a reason, then you know, your services should just automatically fail over. And if your applications are built in that way, then your user will really never be any the wiser of it.
And Tim, in terms of bringing you into from our perspective as well, you know, piggybacking on some of that real insight that Andy's just given us, one of the things, you know, back to optimizing a cloud journey, one of the things that I tend to see a lot of customers look for ideas, support, expertise. You know, one of those phrases, I guess, is around how do you take your current operating model, you know, you think in a certain way, an organization potentially running their own data centers, and avoid taking that and projecting that same way of working or same way of approaching security, same way of thinking into a cloud environment, where, you know, which is not a good way of approaching it, because ultimately you are just taking some of the good and bad that you've already got. And how do you see that play out in terms of the conversations that you and the rest of the Cloud Center of Excellence have with other organizations?
Yeah, so I think the key thing comes back to something that Matt said near the start, which is we wanted a partner that could help us work on achieving outcomes. You know, the best place to start for all of this is, what outcome is it you're trying to deliver? And generally, when you're thinking about security, you're thinking about outcomes in terms of particular applications or particular communities of users. So once you work out, you know, what it is that you want that application to be able to do, and how secure you need that application to be, and who it's going to, and these should be things that business owners know anyway. But actually, quite often what you find is when you go into an organization, there are a number of applications where nobody's actually thought about that. And so the move to cloud is a great opportunity to go, well, actually, what outcomes are we trying to get here? And once you've said that and described them, then what you're saying is, we want this outcome, but we don't really care how we get there. And that then gives you a benefit, because the team that's working with you can then come up with, well, look, there are various options for this. How, you know, what suits you best? And that's the way to get the best out of people. You know, if you try and say, oh, we want this outcome and we want you to deliver it in that way, often you don't get innovative thinking. But I think one of the great things about the partnership with Flagship was they were able to think about where they wanted to get to, and we were then able to help with, here's how you could do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think from my perspective as well, you know, talking to customers a lot and working obviously very closely with you guys, what I also see is that, you know, the very big hyperscale platforms have spent a long time and a lot of money driving into their platforms a greater level of visibility and log analysis and, you know, that governance and policy, which to do that at a data center level, you know, you either have to invest in quite a lot of time and tools to do that. So one of the advantages around Optimize That Cloud Journey is making use of those native tools to get better insights and better visibility into how is my security posture on certain things, get better fine-grained control around you know, those kind of, whether it's a virtualizing the network or virtualizing those work groups. All of that kind of granularity equals improved security to deliver those outcomes. I certainly see that as well.
Yeah, and we've built over a number of years now our own monitoring portal. It's secure, use MFA to access it on the web, and that also provides visibility into what's going on, as well as tools that enable customers to self-serve as much as possible with elements of their infrastructure. So there, I think again, you get the benefit of experience if you choose an experienced partner, and that can help too.
Cool. So I'm going to bring in a question from the audience. I thought a bit of audience participation at this point. We've got a couple more questions from our side, but one I thought was an interesting one. Did any legacy applications not migrate to work, and how did you handle these? This is from Andrew.
It's probably one for me, I guess, but I can't think.
Maybe it is for you. Maybe it's from an Andrew, or it's to an Andy. I don't know what.
I can't think of any applications that we couldn't make work. Like I say, the housing management system, because of its legacy nature, was the one we were most worried about, and probably the oldest one we're running. And to be fair, we got that working with actually not too much trouble. Again, it's still fundamentally it's a Windows estate. It's not much different if you're running it on VMware or any other hypervisor. It's a Windows server at the end of the day, and as long as you've got all your kind of Windows architecture around it, if it is a Windows system, then it should work.
I'm just trying to think back through the journey. I remembered, I think at one point we engaged your financial application company to help us a little bit on that journey. I think that one application was, we got it there, but it was going through that. And now I think there was one user had an application that had a third-party plug-in device, I think, from memory. Just I'd rather be upfront. I remember that being a challenge, but it was one user across the whole estate that had a very very individual use case, and that was around the app stream and the workspace at the time, from memory.
Yeah, you remember that better than I do. Yes, I do remember that one. Yeah, it was the finance user that on their remote desktop they needed a physical card reader to be able to kind of input a credit card for sort of bank account verification. That was the only thing I think we didn't get working.
You've just got something coming up on your screen, John. Just popping up on your shared screen.
I think there's just one thing that I've noticed in the chat that sort of it was a question. You keep talking about the number of Windows workloads in this estate, and I'm sure for a lot of people it's kind of like, oh well, if I have a lot of Windows workloads, I should obviously go Azure. I mean, Digital Space does both Azure and AWS, but from your point of view, what have you had any concerns about running Windows workloads on AWS? Because I think there was a stat I saw recently that said more Windows workloads run on AWS than on Azure, which would surprise a lot of people, I know.
I think really and truthfully, we just kind of got out and tested it, and did those sort of sandbox environments and bits and pieces, and you learn kind of very quickly that actually it works as well on AWS as it does anywhere else. At the end of the day, a Windows server is a Windows server, no matter where it lives or what you do with it. Fundamentally it's the same thing. So really it just then became a choice for us as to kind of where do we host it, which service provider do we use.
Cool. Obviously we had another question from the audience, but I'm going to mix it in with the question I had as well. So remember, obviously, understand that the move to the cloud was originally delayed, Matt. I remember it well over that time, and obviously we worked really close with you. And what would you suggest to the attendees on around planning, creation of a clear plan, the business case, and then the final killer question is, what would you've done differently, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, it was originally delayed. That was because of COVID and things like that, and we had an emergency budget come in and all the rest of it, which delayed kind of the investment and things like that. What would I have done differently? I would not have accepted that delay, if I'm being honest. I should have, and I look back on it and I think what I should have done was really stood up to my exec team at that point and said, look, we've got we had a really thorough business case, server by server. We could have done the costs and the savings and service by service and everything like that. I remember oh, I can't remember the name. You had that agent which collected all of the data about all the compute power and everything that was required and kind of on premise, and then we mapped it all to everything we would be getting into the cloud, and the savings were there and the plan was there and every step of the migration. It was a phenomenal piece of work. I don't think, if I'm being honest, I don't think we've ever taken anything so data driven and detailed to our executive team in terms of a business case, but it was still delayed. And I think that's the thing I would have done differently. Is I wish I'd have said, look, come on, I know we're all in a bit of a panic about COVID and people working from home, but the cloud is where we should be, even during this time, probably even more so. So that's one of the things I think I would have done differently.
Great answer. And I remember that plan with you, and obviously using that data. And funny enough, the next in a second, I'll want to say something to the audience about an offer to help them on that journey. I think that looking ahead, though, obviously, I know as an organisation you're currently investigating partnerships with two other organisations. Has your move to the cloud made able to grow as is that giving you that opportunity to grow as an organisation more easily, more quickly?
Yeah, so there's really in terms of growth strategies, we because we have this what we call the federated structure. So we have the 3 geographic housing associations. We're forever kind of like seeking partnerships with the housing associations. So there's 2 discussions going on at once at the moment with 2 other housing associations who are thinking about joining the group and coming into that federated structure. So it's just a huge headache that we don't have to work, that isn't there anymore in terms of just the scalability. We've got that limitless scale. It's a real asset when it comes to partnership talks and things like that. I remember when we did the previous partnerships with Victory and Suffolk, it was a real headache of, course, we've got these, what are we need to buy more kit, we need to get it in, so we need to decommission that data center and expand that. And it was it was a whole load of planning and kind of risk management within due diligence and things like that. That's just disappeared. It's not there this time round. It's a real asset in terms of growth. But obviously, we have the growth through the commercial ventures we do via our repairs company and our gas company as well. And quite frankly, they're saying, oh, I'm going to go and get X more contracts and grow, but I'm just shrugging my shoulders. I'm like, yeah, do what you want. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure and stuff like that. I could almost give them a price per head count or a price per contract from a cloud perspective. That's the level of detail that we kind of have. So it takes away all those headaches when it comes to partnerships and growth strategies and things like that.
Wow.
Equally, it works the other way. If you have a period of trying to think the opposite of growth now, shrinking. Consolidation, there we go. If you want to consolidate or you lose some contracts or something like that and you shrink back down, you've got the tools and everything there to not just export growth, but unlike on-premise, fixed cost, fixed asset, sorry, you've got to pay for it regardless of growth or consolidation or whatever it might be. It's not the same in the cloud. It's a real elastic tool that you can use to react to all sorts of changes within your business and things like that.
Well, I think that's possibly all the questions I've seen coming in, John. Might be good to flip to, obviously, this has been a really enjoyable webinar, actually. The time has flown. I know it's just gone 10 to 2. I just wanted to obviously echo something back. One, first of all, thank Andy and Matt for your participation. It's been a pleasure, and as a customer, we really enjoy working with you. And to this day, thank you so much for choosing us as your cloud partner. I'd love more organisations like yourself to join us on that journey. And one of the offers that we put together, which I think was on the next screen, John. We mentioned.
Yeah, I can click forward, Gary. There, it should be on the screen now. In terms of, and this answers one of the questions I think that was posed to me the other day to an organisation, actually, just to sort of tee you up nicely, which was that we know that we want to get onto a cloud journey. Strategically imperative. The board have signed that off, that we can see the value of the cloud. But now the next question is, how do we get there? What's that journey look like? And that sometimes is one of the biggest challenges. Is they know where they want to get to. So you obviously, from a cloud center of excellence perspective, you engage with organizations every day around that. So do you want to take us through some of the things that we have in our kit bag to help?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, Matt, you mentioned the software that we put on your data center. We're doing that with a lot of organizations, mainly just to capture that live information, because what you tend to find is data centers are oversized, and then you do the like for like, and then the numbers don't, the business case almost falls over from day one. We're doing that a lot now with organizations. It's a free offer. We literally get the software onto your data centers or server rooms, or it might be bare metal, it might be VMware, it might be hypervised. We'll get that on there, capture that data, and we can do a very quick capture. Or we normally like to run it for about a month. So obviously, if you have got peaks and troughs in your applications, finance gets busy at the end of the month. We capture all that data. We then bring it in. We then work on a high-level plan, look at those spends, help inform that business case. But also, the offer is to come on site with customers and literally help you almost optimize for cloud. Look at it's not all just about hardware. It's about where's your plan as an organization, bringing that into the mix. And also we'll help you look at, how mature are you as an organization, and work out where the strengths and weaknesses are. So the little radar on the bottom right, that's all comes from input that we work with the organization. We come on site for about half a day and help you work through that journey. And that's a free offer to organizations, and then we can expand that should we want to go a lot more detailed. But this gives you that real, what do I do tomorrow? How do I go to that exec, or how do I put a case together to change? And so I think we've got a little output on the next screen, I think, just to show you how detailed we can go. Obviously, this is probably quite small for the webinar, but we'll literally look and help see where you are as an organization and fill those gaps. It might be around skills, where the skill journeys, Andy mentioned about his team. You might be looking at your current infrastructure, assessing those applications which are ready to move, which ones you might be replacing in due course. There's a lot of information we can bring together and literally distill that into an output and give you a plan of where to go. We can, obviously mentioned around our managed service, we'll help dovetail in, so when you do move, we can a bit that handhold should you require it. So we'd love, anyone watching this recording or watching here live, just please reach out. We'd love to speak to you and help you on that journey. I think really we're ready to wrap up. Really, I think John, just over to you.
Yeah, there's literally one question that popped up on the chat that says, just around that engagement, Gary, in terms of mobilizing and the amount of time, the effort that a customer needs to put in, from their own resources or time, what does that typically look like for a discovery process? How time intensive it from their perspective?
Not heavy at all. Obviously, we'd work with you. Our team would help you get that software onto your data center very, very quickly, and it captures that data. And then the on-site is circa half a day to actually work through the outputs. So if you want to do an accelerated one, we can do it in a 2-week duration and come on site. Possibly, I'd recommend a month, and then we come on site, and with that half a day workshop, we'll work through with you that sort of cloud assessment journey, which we've got here, and then work out how we get you from A to B. But also, it's about working technically as well. So actually working with the dev teams that already know, they might know VMware, or they might know a particular environment, SQL, whatever. We'll handhold and literally come and work through those pros and cons as well. So yeah, it's painless. It's a no-brainer really in that respect.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you, and thanks for giving that overview. And for anybody watching, Gary's contact details are on the screen now. We've also got an email, which is cloud@digitalspace.co.uk, which comes through to a group from the Cloud Centre of Excellence who would love to engage with you. There's multiple ways to engage with us. It's for me just to say thank you to Flagship, Matt and Andy. Really appreciate taking your time out of always a busy day. I know that you guys, every day is a new day and new challenges, but really appreciate your insights. I genuinely believe that those insights do help other organizations, and like everything in life, that's invaluable experience. So thank you, gents, for taking the time. Tim, from heading up our Cloud Centre of Excellence, thank you for your input. Gary, great job in curating the webinar, so thank you. And finally, to the audience, thank you for spending your time with us. I hope it has been valuable. Love to hear any feedback, and all the best, and we hope to engage with you in the near future. So from me and on behalf of the Digital Space team, thanks once again for being part of the webinar. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.